So thank you, Letitia, Robert, Betsy, Stephen, Mark. Now it's your turn, you all, to ask anything that is on your mind, any burning questions, anything you want to challenge the speakers on. I know it's before noon, but still.
We have our champagne.
Okay. Okay, yep, please.
Well, first of all, I must thank the IFPRI for inviting me to attend this seminar. I have a long association with IFPRI, probably over 4 decades, as a public servant from Bangladesh, involved in policy making, policy implementation, and various aspects of governance. So I'm very lucky to be exposed to this seminar and the issues that have been raised, and it increases my knowledge. First of all, let me also thank the DG of IWMI for a comprehensive picture of the world water security. That has been very, very interesting. In Bangladesh, we have a problem of water, though at one time we thought that it's a delta area which will be full of water and so on, but things have changed over the years and decades. The main problem is, of course, regarding irrigation for agriculture and food security. Though we have reached food security, but the water needs have changed because of the changing nature of agriculture, cereal and non-cereals, these kind of things. And then unexpected floods in the coastal areas, and urbanization of water, urbanization and water management, that has become a new problem. And the quality of water in the urban areas has really deteriorated for drinking purposes, and government has to do a lot of work for that. The coastal areas, because of the climate change, the environment is changing in the coastal areas and sometimes bringing in unexpected floods. And as far as the SDG is concerned, the Bangladesh has done, I must say, significant amount of work in development of seeds by our Bangladesh Rice Research Institute in collaboration with IRI in developing water-resistant rice variety which can be submerged under water for 2 weeks, salinity-resistant rice variety, and drought-resistant rice variety. But there are still problems because of this environmental impact of agriculture. Though the share of agriculture in Bangladesh is around hardly 15% now, from 70% when the country was first created. So there is plenty of need for research and development and fiscal policy support for these works. One thing that I did not hear in the discussions is the disputes regarding, what shall I say, geopolitical issues of water problem. I just mentioned 2 issues. One is intra-India. In the southern part of India, between states, there is a dispute regarding water sharing. And similarly, between Bangladesh and India also, there is a dispute between water sharing, on water sharing between the upper riparian and the lower riparian. So the general policy direction is now not to go for building big dams or barrages, but to go for small irrigation projects. One thing that I heard and then saw myself many years ago in southern India, they used to call it harvesting water from rain. I have seen some houses in the rural areas, extreme rural areas, they are building structures. They had built structures adjacent to their house to harvest rains rainwater in those and use it by purifying it in the other parts of the year. So these are my few comments, and I must thank the IFPRI again for inviting me to this seminar.
Thank you. Yeah. Why don't we take a few questions? Maybe in the back.
Good morning, Kelly Witkowski from the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. As I was listening to the comments across the panel, talking about uncertainty, what we don't know, and the need to build political will, but then listening to Mark's comments at the end about, most of water productivity coming from, increased water productivity coming from crop breeding, and does irrigation actually save water? It really strikes me that part of the issue is that the science is not really informing the decision-making to the level that it needs to be. And of course, this is not unique to water. But I'm wondering if you guys can speak a little bit to how you think that might happen if, obviously there's not a silver bullet, but just, what we do know is not being used effectively, so will producing more and more knowledge, get us over the hump from this cute circular cycle that you mentioned to actually, action on the ground.
Okay, maybe.
Brian Bruns, independent consultant sociologist, work on water governance and participation in irrigation management. My question, in a sense, there was a nice slide early on about the potential in Africa of different things, including groundwater, small reservoirs, solar pumping, and there are lots of opportunities and good work that's already been done. So in terms of going forward, interested if maybe we could hear more about what will be done to better understand the opportunities and the ways to mitigate the real risks, environmental, economic, and so on, and to kind of make that information available not just to national policymakers, but to individual farmers and communities and others so they can make, better informed, wiser choices. Thank you.
Brian asked, we've been working, with USAID, which has a very extensive program on smallholder irrigation, and they're working closely with IFPRI, and we had a conference recently in Washington with them, with Water for Food Institute. IWMI was very much engaged, USDA, and one of the things we tried to do was to really have a strong representation of farmer organizations from the continent, and that was a big game changer for us. We learned a lot from them. They pose some very big challenges to us, but that are shifting our thinking. So I think that's one way, and it's kind of the most obvious way that we're trying to ensure that connection, at least at some level. And then, but their big challenge was when you do go to the implementation phase, can you put the farmer organizations into a bigger role vis-a-vis, give government seeds some space and farmer organizations come in, of course working with the private sector and others. So that's sort of a very obvious one, but I think also, as you and others have indicated, information sharing. We just need to get more of this information into formats that work for a broader audience, that it's not just a high-level policy discussion, but it's helping to bring that information, and then getting a chance to get with social media now, we can get a lot more feedback and comment and get discussions going around some of these issues that are relevant if we believe that this is a good way forward.
Mark?
Yeah, let me respond to your question there. I think it's a combination. There's a set of things where more science is definitely needed, and that's things like on the crop breeding and interaction between water, photosynthesis, and evapotranspiration. That's high-level science that could have very high payoffs. I think pragmatic science that needs to be done more is still to sort out this conundrum between private profitability of new irrigation technology and social benefits and profitability. And I think that can be done through social science analysis. The other is there are things that are very well known, as you implied. Topmost is that subsidies of the type that are out there are bad, but that's where we need the kinds of political will issues that many other panelists have brought up and that you brought up as well. There needs to be a new emphasis, and I think it has to be done country by country or state by state within countries to try to get that message out, and to try to get some experiments in the field of how can you move away from those and get innovative ways to get direct payments to farmers where that's needed to avoid poverty, negative poverty implications, and so there's a lot that has to be done on those kinds of issues.
Anyone? Seth?
Maybe I can just respond to both of those comments about the scaling and getting information to a broader audience is through this work that we've been doing on agricultural water management. Indeed, the first step is to provide the evidence, but then is to translate, once you know what has potential, to translate that into an actionable recommendation. So we've been working on business models, developing with IFPRI suitability maps so we know where investments might make the most sense, and now trying to devise business models, business cases that we can actually test with partners to see how it might actually work in practice and tweak it as we go to see, adjust it for different locations, but pilot it to see, with our partners to see how it works and how it might be scaled forward.
Yeah, I would just add, same vein really. The years that we've been investing with IFPRI, IMI, and Texas A&M on small-scale irrigation, a lot of it has been the analytics, the hydrology, the sustainability, access for women, et cetera. The challenge going forward is to get uptake. And so we're, I think, bullish on that. And frankly, some of the things you showed, Meredith, really suggest that some of the policy changes are coming that are going to enable this. I mean, everybody knows the story from Bangladesh, right? Basically, when they took the tariffs off those pumps, it revolutionized agriculture in the country. And I think the opportunity for that in the African context, especially figuring out how to get people with money maybe earned off farm back into the community, is going to be exciting. So it's the combination now of the decision support tools at sort of all levels with a better economic opportunity environment I think is exciting.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
Just to add one perspective, something that Steve said about the fact that the agriculture sector has articulated better than the general water sector these issues. I think that is a very, very important point because and the fact that the agriculture sector has done that, and we're all sitting here talking about resilience and moving forward, is a challenge that I put forward, that the agriculture sector should reach out and engage more fully, even more so than in the past, with the water sector to share the knowledge that we have. Because, for example, from the GWP perspective, take a country water partnership like Zambia, where they have a multi-sectoral group of partners at the table. Sharing that information at the table helps that group, whether they're managing within a basin or trying to help government to make decisions, gives them better tools and better information so that they can make the right decisions. Knowledge, it helps with decision making. So if we really are going to tackle this problem that we have of not making the progress that we want, for example, with SDG 6, we have to work differently. We can't continue to sit, I'll use the word silos, sit in our silos and expect that we do our part, everything will work. There's so much information and knowledge out there. This is the time for us to bring it together and to share it and to use it together. And in support of the farmers that you were talking about, in support of the mothers and the children, and in support of the youth who are going to have to take this on when we're all gone.
Okay, mindful of the time, and we want to hear from Shengen to close. Maybe just two more quick questions for the panelists.
I have one question from the representative of Chicago Council. He asked, can Mr. Schonberger speak more on the World Bank report on irrigation and groundwater that Mr. Bertram mentioned?
She's not yet out, but...
Okay, and another question? Yeah, in the back.
Thank you. Aparna Sridhar with the Nature Conservancy. I think there was great insights from everyone, so I really appreciate bringing this group together. Probably building on Letitia's last point, what I heard a lot was that there's a continued level of fragmentation across the four I's and within each of the I's, information for incentives. The one piece that I would bring up to this group and would be interested in some reactions was I felt like we were also missing fragmentation of financing, which drives a lot of the challenges in bringing Nexus. And I heard pockets of innovative cases and tools, and I know the entire community would be supportive of wanting to hear more of that. But I would just wanted to know if, in addition to the 4 I's, we need to add an extra F that says, if we get these together, and it's the financing, and thoughts on that proposal.
I was put on the spot directly. I think the report that Rob was referring to is one we've done for Africa on groundwater, and I guess the punchline on it is that it tries to draw a lot more attention to the deep groundwater. So it recognizes that there's a lot going on with shallow groundwater, and that's important, but it makes the point that there is a lot of groundwater in the African continent, and that it suggests starting to look much more carefully at the issue of deep groundwater. Not something that can be exploited normally by an individual farmer with a solar pump, but could be done either for cities or for collections of farmers. But it would require a higher level of collective action. So that's really what the story is. And then it does, call for more work on the economics and other aspects. So I think that's probably the main thing, and certainly agree with the financing one. I mean, the water sector in general, forget those of us in the room here, that's a debate outside. If you talk to the utility sector in the U.S., they're wondering, what do we do about getting more of the innovative financing in? And, D.C. is the great example with the Century Bond that George Hawkins was able to put in place, which is still sort of stands alone. But also, again, going to more of these decentralized approaches, so there may be more private to private instead of so much going through the public sector.
Okay, yeah, that's.
Just to build on that comment around the financing, I completely agree. I mean, I think there's a real opportunity to especially capitalize on some of the interest in private capital. But how do we direct it in the right way? Not to speak of then the more, if you will, more public capital flows. There's tremendous interest in green bonds. You're absolutely right, Stephen. There've been a couple. For Blue Plains here, for DC Water.
We need blue bonds now, right?
What's that?
We need blue bonds.
Well, blue bonds. That's right. But because green bonds are so well understood in the energy sector, there's interest now in extending those into water. The question is, what are we funding? And so this idea of, which is something we put out with Climate Bonds Initiative, CWP, Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, a set of criteria for what are truly deeper green or bluer bonds in this sector, so that we're not just funding anything. But one of the big challenges here, too, is we talked about the need for more circular and decentralized approaches, whether in urban infrastructure or helping smallholder farmers and so on. This is very difficult in private capital markets, because what they want to fund is nothing smaller than $50 million. And this is true, actually, for a lot of multilateral development banks as well. It can be very challenging to aggregate those. We need some kind of, innovative approaches, actually, to take those smaller scale, much more appropriate kinds of technology and create investable financing streams. So I think that's a real opportunity and a challenge.
Okay, thank you. So before we turn to Schengen, any last comments from the panel? Okay, then, maybe Claudia?
Just one final word on the gentleman from Bangladesh brought up some very important questions about transboundary issues in water, both between states within federal systems, even at the local level, and between countries. And I think one of the promising moments here is to try to bring greater information to those discussions, which are so inherently political and social, but can be bounded a bit around fact. And I think some of the work that, for example, IWMI has been doing on water accounting, simply to put facts on the table about where the water is flowing, where it is being withdrawn and used, is very important and very useful to have third-party, remote sense but land-ground truthed information about actually where the water is going to help begin a discussion, because so many water discussions are so emotive and not necessarily factually bound. Also on the transboundary level, there's a lot of work that IWMI has done over the years. We, for example, host the Indus Knowledge Platform. Our task manager for that, Alan Nicol, is here with us today, which provides open access to the best data and modeling available for countries, again, to have these discussions, at least within the context of a third-party trusted set of data and facts that help constrain and focus energies that otherwise can be quickly dissipated because of the political and emotional nature of conflicts over water. So I think that this is an area that there's a lot to contribute with science and technology and information and third-party safe space for discussion. So thank you for raising that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. And let me invite our host, Sheng, up.
All right.